Oh, oh, well, it says starting soon, but it says we're live. All right, there we go. Welcome everybody to the Veteran Sports Voice podcast. I know it's been a while. Man, I made that cross country journey with my wife there, Wendy, and our dog Huck, and a couple of cats. And wow is all I can say. But it is good to be home. It is good to be in the South. Where I'm at, I'm looking at beautiful Lake Chico, Lake Village, Arkansas. I think is actually home with a fried catfish sandwich or something because I've been eating a heck of them. And now I got my man, former veteran, also naval veteran, Ian McCants, holding things down in Atlanta. But you know he's an unbiased Alabama fan. Ian, how you doing, my man? How are you doing, brother?
Man, doing pretty good. Glad that you made it safely and that the trip has been a success. And yeah, man, it's been a minute, but like I said, I'm ready to get back on that bicycle. So let's go.
I tell you, man, it's been a minute, and I was telling Chris, the producer back here, my buddy, I was telling him, man, I feel almost nervous again coming out and doing this because it seems like it's been so long. But hey, before we get started, I want to say something real fast before I even get into my intro. Look, this is the Veteran Sports Voice podcast, and it's that podcast spoken by those who've served, and myself and Ian, we both served in the Army and Navy, dual service veteran. Myself, Ian, a naval veteran, and look, regardless of your politics or anything, it don't matter. But there's some real world stuff going down in this world where we got men and women in America's different uniforms that are doing real world stuff in faraway places where people, you know, there's some good people, there's some bad people out in this world. And you know what? I want to take the moment and just dedicate this podcast to those guys. And if you're out there and you know a service member or a family member whose son or daughter is out there serving in one of those theaters of operation, hey, you know what? Take a moment, send some good thoughts, good vibes, prayers, whatever it is, send it that way, because you know what? I can tell you right now, when they signed on the dotted line, they didn't expect to be where they're at right now.
Yeah.
So so before we start that, I wanted to hit with that right there. And with that being said, guys, you know, Ian, if you got something pop in there on that, if you want to say anything on that, you know,
I agree with you, man. My thing is, you know, a lot of times we say things just, you know, especially here in the South, you know, just being polite. You know, and you know, I've been told numerous times, you know, thank you for your service, but you know, I just ask that, you know, people really reflect on what that means. You know, Sean, you touched on a harsh reality. You know, very few people join the military out of sheer patriotism. You know, a lot of times it's out of to see the world or, you know, benefits. And like you said, you know, that's why I really respected Colin Powell, because I witnessed one time he was given a commencement speech to some graduates at an Ivy League school, and you know they were asking him about, you know, the plans and benefits for veterans, and you know he was saying, let's be clear, you know, you are a soldier. And so that's what it is. You know, a lot of times people join for whatever motivation and then find themselves in, you know, some situations and they rise to the occasion. Okay, that's right. What they have to do. And so you know, I just ask that people, you know, really keep in mind the sacrifices and a lot of times the difficulties that people have to overcome in order for you to enjoy, you know, your basic human, you know, freedoms, even if it's just laying in your bed at night. You know, that's a freedom, a basic freedom that isn't guaranteed unless there's a sacrifice of a lot of people that are doing it voluntarily or involuntarily. Okay, so I just ask that, you know, people have some awareness of what people really go through and just don't give lip service. You know, if you're thanking someone for their service, just really take a moment to reflect what that really means.
That's right. Amen, brother. I couldn't agree more. And with that being said, man, I called you today to talk about, let's kick this thing back off. And I came up with an idea and I threw it out. And so if anybody's on here and they've been watching and they were here from X and they saw our post, you know, let me just go ahead and clear something up right now. Just right off the gate. This ain't a hot seat show. All right. That ain't what this is about. That's just going the lazy route. And you know, so right. This is about something bigger. And you know, and I really thought about this. I was like, who has the most to lose in the SEC in 2026? And if you follow this conference for more than 5 minutes, you already know, losing the SEC, it don't cost you games. They don't just cost you the games. It can cost you control. It can cost your momentum that you built from the previous year. And real quick, and I saw this firsthand with Coach Morris, and I'm not trying to be negative with Coach Morris. I was there. I love Coach Morris to death, but it cost that locker room, and he lost that fan base, and he lost his job. And so I've seen that. So and patience, and as well as I do in the SEC, patience, that ain't a virtue, man. It's a countdown clock. Right, the SEC. Right. And when I brought this up, like who has the most to lose? Look, 9-3. If Arkansas goes 6-6, the fan base is going to be livid. If they go 6-6 at Mississippi State, they're going to be livid. If they go 9-3, they're going to build a statue of Coach Silverfield. I can tell you that right now. But now 9-3 at Georgia, 9-3 at Alabama, 9-3 at Texas. That's a different. You start to lose some things. Do I think either guys are going to lose their job? No. Well, we'll get to Alabama later. That's going to be our last gig on that. But that's the whole point of this show, I guess, is not which coach is going to likely lose his job, but hey, what coach is likely to start hearing those rumblings, what's going to happen, or lose that trust of that fan base that's already kind of side-eyeing them, and I got a guy there on that. So, that's where I wanted to go with this show. So, let's see what we got here. And I sent you my top 7. I sent top 7. I sent 7. And because we could go through this all, and you know what, and I want to read them in no particular order. You know what, we'll start out, with top 7 coaches most to lose in 2026. And again, no particular order. I got Steve Sarkisian, Texas. He had a 10-3 record last year with 6-2 in the conference. All right. And then I have Kalen DeBoer, Alabama, but we're going to save Alabama for last. 11-4 and 7-1 in the SEC. You got Brett Venables, Oklahoma, 10-3, 6-2 in the SEC. And a fun fact, something I found out about Brett Venables. Who in the hell? This is insane to me. John Blank in the mid-90s, I think 94, 96 or 95, 96, somewhere in there, and Brett Venables. They're the only 2 coaches in the modern era at Oklahoma that have had multiple losing seasons, meaning two, only 2. That's a fan base that ain't used to losing, right? So you got Shane Beamer, South Carolina. He was 4-8 last year, 1-7 in the conference, and I got a take on him that I want to share later. We got Josh Heupel at Tennessee. 8-5 last year, 4-4 in the SEC. I got Jeff Libby, Mississippi State, 5-8, 1-7. The man's coaching at a place that's, it's hard to win. It's hard to win there. So, and then I got Eli Drinkowitz at Missouri. That's my 7, 8-5 and 4-4. So with that being said, Ian, which coach would you like to start with first here, or do you have a pick? Do you care? Well,
let's start with my favorite, who isn't DeBoer. I said this a lot. Sark is my guy. Right. I was always, impressed with him. I think that Sark would have been much further along when you talk about the tier of coaches if he didn't have the issues that he had at USC. I remember his tenure at Washington, man, and then he got to USC and they were winning. And then next thing he had some type of, I think, alcohol situation. And then, he was just here and there. But, man, when he came, to Bama, because think about what had happened. Lane Kiffin had transformed our offense from a, dink and dunk, hand the ball off, to where we're seeing a guy raising his hand, to signal pass touchdowns, and the pass hadn't even been, completed yet, And so when he left, and I still don't know all the details around that, there was a lot of worry. And Sark came in, and he was a Band-Aid at first, but then I think he left and then he came back, and he just, to me, called that season that he had with Matt Jones was one of my favorite seasons. Devontae Smith, man. And, that was Sark as that offensive coordinator that year. So let's start with him because, he's out there at Texas, and it just seems like to me, a no-win situation for him. But I agree that Sark should be up at the top of your list as far as coaches that's on the hot seat or facing pressure.
Right. So with that being said, so some of the perspectives on Sark, right? We got, he's success. He can rebuild a program. He can achieve consecutive top 4 finishes, and he developed one of the nation's top rosters. I mean, according to Athlon Sports, man, they're right there in the top tier of rosters right there for this year. Now, criticisms concerning offensive play calling, the red zone performance, and penalties, and some debate his effectiveness, at navigating the high stakes of prime time matchups, right? We could argue the last year's Ohio State game is one of those games. But then you go back, when they fumbled it away at Florida in October 4, that was a game that they should have won, and they played catch up for the rest of the season after that, right there.
Right.
I think if something like that goes down for Sark like that, like something like a Florida goes down again this year right here, as well. I mean, look, Texas has run off some good coaches in the past,
right?
Right. And so, there's a lot of money there, and Texas, they think they are that. Gosh, I know, and maybe this is the old Southwest Conference guy coming out of me, but they always thought they were God's gift to college football, and and now you're in the SEC. First off, you got to prove yourself in the SEC. And then, and if you can navigate the SEC, then you're going to be able to navigate, that national, and they haven't done that yet in the SEC. So
right.
That's the first thing they're going to have to do, and there's like no reason, there's no reasons. They got money, and they've got Arch Manning, they reloaded on defense. And so, let's see, but if they have, in my opinion, if something happens and goes down and they're playing catch up like they did after Florida, I think it could be disastrous for Sark there. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, man. I think what's facing Sark is very simple. And in order for me to explain this, I have to always refer to the GOAT, Nick Saban. Now I call Nick Saban the GOAT, but what was he the GOAT at? He was the GOAT at being a CEO. He always got a lot of credit for being a great DB coach, but I saw Bama's defensive backs routinely not turning their heads around and getting all these pass interference, penalties. And so, I thought that, when Kirby ran the D, I gave Kirby the credit for the D. Even Jeremy Pruitt, and a lot of times, but never Saban. Recruiting, yes, but, as far as the coaching intangibles, he really wasn't great at anything except running a program. I think what he would do is he would walk in and have the conversations that we're not privy to and say, hey, sit your butt down. This is how I'm going to do it. Shut up. That's what it is. We can look at Sark and tell he doesn't do that. Okay, so because he doesn't do that, he better achieve what we expect him to achieve. We expect Sark to be an offensive genius. So when you got Arch Manning out there looking retarded, then we're going to blame that on Sark. Now, if he was winning the game 56-3, if he was losing the game 56-58, he always has a built-in excuse. Okay, defensive coordinator. But that's not what happened. Okay, the team looked lost, and they didn't look like they had an identity. You can't imagine Sark walking into anybody's offices saying, hey, sit down. This is my show. This is what I'm going to do. And on top of that, man, we bring the real here. He's in an interracial marriage, and so I think a lot of times this man, he has to deal with a lot of stuff. And so he just has no choice but win. And if he doesn't, then he has too many hooks pulling him in all different directions.
Right.
And at the end of the day, he's going to fail because of that, because he can't do what Saban did and just, command the big money makers that are really behind the scenes, pulling all the strings. Sark isn't man enough to do that. So I love him, But I just see further issues with him
Right.
going forward.
Well, I tell you what, we don't pull no punches here, as you can tell. My guy, we call it like it is. And our producer Chris brought up Steve Sarkisian, 2-11 versus AP top 10 teams at Texas. And I'm looking.
Right.
Let's see.
Right.
Last year, he won at Arizona State, 39-31. But then he lost on January 10th, 28-14 to Ohio State, and he lost that first game of the year, 14-7, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the first game of the year for them at Ohio State. So,
right.
Yeah, so I mean, he's got a track record of losing the big games. And then we go over here, and I'm looking at their schedule, and I know Chris will probably end up bringing that up here shortly. But their schedule is not, they have Ohio State coming to their house, right, on September the 12th. They're at Tennessee, and they're Oklahoma and Dallas. And then they got Florida at home, Ole Miss at home. They're at LSU, and they're at Texas A&M. Their schedule is not easy. It's not the hardest schedule I see, but it's not an easy schedule either. So, and I purposely I didn't look at rankings because I know Ohio State's going to be there. I know Texas A&M is going to be ranked. I'm sure LSU is going to be ranked. I didn't want to set this up because, we have most of these teams are going through spring practices, spring games, which little side note here, go let out. Ian's got a little bit of news from the spring practice at Alabama. He got a little insight on, so we're going to break that out later. But yeah, so I mean, their schedule is daunting, but it's not too daunting. But there are some key games in here that if he loses, this could definitely go sideways for him.
Yeah, I agree, but I also want to be fair to him. Okay, so when we look at his win-loss record, against the AP top whatever, who hadn't done that? Like, we talked about that earlier, Sean. Like, let's not act like Alabama didn't have a lot of luck and help for at least 4 of those championships. Now, 2 of them we went undefeated, but man, it was a whole, like, there was each year, I never felt safe. I never felt safe against a LSU. I never felt safe against an Auburn. I never felt safe against a Georgia, and so those were games that we could lose at any time, and we did a lot of times, Now, one thing that Saban did do was we weren't worried about Tennessee. We weren't worried about that middle level. Okay. But, there was never that top level where we didn't expect to lose 1 or 2 of those games. And so I just don't want to be too hard on the guy and expect perfection, and so that's really what they're asking of him. And it's unfair, but if we're being fair to him, the only difference is that he can't tell the people behind the scenes to shut up. Because who cares what the fans think? Sean, we talked earlier today. You told me something that was shocking. You were like, Arkansas hasn't beat Alabama since when? However, you're one of the most loyal fans that, you make me loyal. You go to Arkansas games, is it packed out? Maybe not, but people are still going to be there. It's the fair weathers that make the difference. And so, man, if I ran a program, I wouldn't care about fans, man. Like, they're going to be there. They're fickle. Like, why was I so nervous living during the era of the greatest run in college football history? And I was scared day to day, stressed out, because we as Alabama fans could not calm down. As I always say, millionaires are some of the most nervous people that you'll ever meet because they're always scared to lose their money. And so, that's what was happening in this situation. So I just want to be fair to him, but he's got to grow some kahunas, and walk into those rooms and, tell the people that matter, to sit down and shut up. But as far as what fans think, man, that wouldn't matter to me. If I had the background of the people that, really matter, that's all I would care about.
Okay, so I get that, but now I'm going to counter with this, and we'll get off here and go to the next one. But you said that about about Saban there, but that's where coaching comes in. Saban won more of those games. He didn't go 2-11. If he went 2-11 versus top 10 teams, you wouldn't have had how many national championships? There's the difference in the coaching right there.
That's you gotta have a goat.
Well, that's what I was saying. You gotta have a goat.
Like, yeah,
damn Longhorn.
I'm not expecting him to match Saban. Saban is the GOAT. but still his performance is not that poor for us to be so
Oh no,
worried about this man's future.
no, I'm not worried about his future. What I'm saying,
Okay.
and this is where we got to get back on track. Who has the most to lose? Does he? I don't think he's going to be fired. Absolutely. I think the if he goes sideways again a little bit, like it did there for a little bit in the middle, then I think people are going to be like, hey, is Sark really the guy for this job? Is that, do we start looking elsewhere like next year? Does he get more under a microscope? I'm not saying any one of there's one coach on here that I'm like, this dude may not make it. Now, there's actually two, but one, we'll get to him in a minute. But I'm like, I don't know how you got your job now, but I do. I kind of know why he kept his job, but we'll get there. But now let's time out, back up. I'm throwing the flag because I'm not saying the man's out of a job. I'm just saying the man might have that microscope a lot more tighter on him next year if things don't, if they don't go make a deep run in the college playoffs.
I agree. I can't even expect him standing up to Archie Manning.
Right.
Archie Manning probably tell him, Steve, sit down, put my son on the phone. I'm gonna tell him the route I want him to run. Like, seriously, man. And I think that's his issue, man. He just gets punked out by everybody. He gets punked out by his quarterback. He gets punked out by his quarterback's granddaddy. He gets punked out by his wife. He gets punked out by his AD. He gets punked out by his boosters. He just gets punked out by everybody, man. And so, that's the issue with him, man. He got to grow some. All right, he's gonna have a dismal future, and I like the guy. Like, I want him to be Alabama's quarterback coach, but he probably would have the same issues there, man. He's probably the best. His ceiling is to be an offensive coordinator. I'm not sold on him, being the head man in my organization.
Well, that's what so he might be that guy. Like this, he might lose that head coaching aura about him and be that coordinator guy. So, okay, so all right, so we're going to skip my number 2 guy here. It wasn't that was in any number, but you know what? Let's move on the other side of that Red River rivalry. Let's go to Brett Venables, Oklahoma. They had a 10-3 record. They were 6-2 in the SEC. But their defense came to play last year. They did that, and look, one of my favorite kids I ever coached in high school, Isaiah Satania, one of their receiver up there. I love the kid. Just, man, he brought speed, like world-class speed. But man, did it just seem like their offense was boring last? Like, first off, I did not like John Mateer. I kept telling everybody from day one that dude was not. He was garbage. Yeah. He was garbage, right? But and to me, Venables has always been known as a defensive coordinator. I don't think I've truly ever thought he was going to be a successful head coach. He is one of only two head coaches that have multiple losing seasons at Oklahoma. And I don't think he needs to be numbered the guy that takes over I've had multiple losing seasons. He has changed that defense. He's got it back to where it needs to be on intensity, accountability, and just the physical play they had. But he really needs oh my gosh, who's the guy there? Ben Arbuckle. That offense, their offensive coordinator, man, it needs to get, and I know this, and this sounds crazy to say, but their offense, man, it needs to get more exciting. They need to put up points more faster. They don't scare you offensively, or they didn't last year. Maybe that's something that changes this year, and I think that needs to change for Venables to be taken seriously in my eyes as a head coach. So, with that being said, what do you think?
No, I agree. It's sort of like what we just talked about with Sarkisian. Okay, so we see what's going on with Venables, but he benefited from what Sarkisian didn't do. Okay, Venables' defense looked decent. Okay, and that's what we gave him credit for because that's how he made his name as defensive coordinator, with Dabo. And so he always can avoid a little bit. Honestly, man, Oklahoma only had somewhat of a reputation this year from beating the average Alabama team. And that was really it, but outside of that, there's nothing to look forward. Okay. There's Mateer, I don't even know his classification. Is he's going to go pro or return? But there's nothing positive there. There was nothing positive outside of the wide receiver that you mentioned. There's nothing positive as far as the running game. The defense played inspired, but even Alabama broke them down when it was time to go. And we saw, what Alabama was really like, when they ended up playing Indiana. So, I don't know, man. I think that he's going to have to improve just like Sarkisian. And at some point, he's going to have an offense which matches the defense. But right now, he's doing at least the right thing of living up to his reputation, which is a defensive mind. And, at certain times, they look very good. And so I think that's going to buy him time, even, maybe a little bit more than Sark.
Right. And if you, I'd say if I can get Oklahoma's schedule is pretty, there we go. Look at that second game at Michigan. Man, you got Bryce Underwood. Bryce Underwood's throwing touchdown passes behind his back right now. Literally, there's a video of him throwing a touchdown pass behind his back. And then look, 2 weeks later, you're at Georgia. Then you're playing Texas in the Red River rivalry at Mississippi State. Mississippi State's going to be a tough out. I don't care. That's just who Coach Libby is. And then they're at Florida, and they got Texas A&M at Missouri. There's some spots that you can hiccup at. Like, dude, it's very possible by September 26th they're 2-2. You take New Mexico and Michigan, and their two losses, Michigan.
I think he can survive this, man. Like, just my humble opinion. If those games are 21-17, 21-20, 21, he'll survive that. Now, if he's, toward the middle part of the season, it's 35-3, 30. No, he's not going to survive that. So we see the schedule. They see the schedule. Okay. It's, man, right off the bat, about 4 or 5 losses. Okay. Right. So, as a biased or unbiased fan, for my sanity, I have to be realistic to some degree. Okay. So it's no good in that schedule for them. Okay. No. But just be competitive, play to your strengths, which is the defense. Show me a little promise and some offense, and he can survive that. But if he's getting beat down and they're still not scoring points, he'll probably be out of there too, because that is a great job, even though I think it's overrated. Perception, that's a great job.
Well, and you're right. And here's my thing. He can lose every game by 3 points, 1 point, 2 points. He can do that and survive, like you're saying, unless Texas wins the national championship.
Oh,
that ain't gonna stand, dog. That's not gonna stand.
No.
He'll be on the first thing smoking out of Norman, baby. You bet. You take that to the bank. So that's my take on it right there.
Absolutely.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, will cover Brent Venables and your Oklahoma Sooners. Let's see. Before I get into this guy, you know what? Let's just dive right into this guy. Shane Beamer, South Carolina. Bro, first off, you need to be thinking, God, you be going to whether it's confession or mass or down at the Back Row Baptist Church, whatever it is, you need to be thanking God you got a job. Like, bro, you went 4-8, 1-7. You have a quarterback that's built like a tank, and now, and I will say this, he brought in Art Browse. Kendall Browse, and that dude, look, I've seen what he did. KJ Jefferson's last good season he ever had in college was under Kendall Browse. That dude is more of a quarterback whisperer than a lot of people give him credit for. And I think I'm curious to see how Lenore Sellers is going to do. I think he may get some of them eyes off, but then I was sitting there going, you know what? He's going to help out South Carolina. But then I saw South Carolina's schedule. Damn, is all I got to tell you. Like, it's not nice, everybody knows it. Frank Beamer's son, he's a rebuilder. He's one of those coaches. He can maximize talent. He's kind of reminds me of like a Houston Nutt, like Houston Nutt did more with less. But, and you got up here, you look at their schedule. They're at Alabama, at Florida, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, at Clemson. And that's not counting that you're playing Texas A&M at home. There's nothing nice about that schedule right there.
Right.
And let's see, God forbid, but anything goes down with the Lenore Sellers and something happens. I don't think they got a capable backup. I could be wrong, but I just don't see it happening. He needs to improve that offense and just the consistency issues. And I think bringing in Kendall Browse was a very smart move on his part. But I personally think the only reason he has that job now is because the AD there was looking and going, there's a lot of other teams looking for coaches, and we don't want to be in that mix right there. So yeah, that's the deal. We don't have it. And now the AD that he has now is Jeremiah Donati. Donati, I think is how you pronounce it. He didn't hire Beamer. So there is no loyalty there at all. So if you have a 4-7 season, I mean, when we did who could lose the most, well, Beamer is most likely to lose his job out of all the coaches. And I guess when it comes down to it, if you want to who could lose the most, it could be Beamer. But I think it's kind of unfair because I don't think if the coaching carousel hadn't been like it was last year, I think Beamer would have been gone last year. That's just my opinion on it. So, he's got he's that 4-8 season. He can't have no more of those. And, you've got Sellers and you got Stewart at defensive end. That's a key player there. I think if there's a repeat of 2025, I mean, I know this ain't about a hot seat thing, but I think he ain't going to have a seat at the table in the SEC. So that's my take on that one.
You know what, man? I agree with you, but this is where I got to be real. I don't care that man has 10 4-8 seasons in a row. It's South Carolina, man. Sometimes you just got to realize who you are. Your mascot is a gamecock. You are an embarrassment. Okay, let's not let Dawn Staley, cast a blanket over the whole university like you guys are winners. I don't know, what Steve Spurrier and Lou Holtz did to make you guys so arrogant. Man, I'll never forget. It was like 2010. I was at that game, when South Carolina and you had, I think, Stephen Garcia lose his mind, man. And let me tell you, as we're walking out, because it became evident that South Carolina was going to win that game. So most of the Bama fans, we walked down. It didn't even feel like it was a real stadium, man. It was like in the parking lot of like a fair. and as we're walking down, they give us a standing ovation like we had won the game. Like it was ridiculous, man. So who are you going to hire? What do you offer? Do you offer NIL? No. What do you offer? So I get it, but at the same time, you have to be realistic as to what you are as a program. No, you're not going to match just about anybody. Vanderbilt has surpassed you as an organization. So let's be clear. If you have this man who carries his daddy's name and that's all that he's given, but your next coach is not going to give at least that. So be thankful that they're out there, playing hard. Be thankful that, Alabama struggled to beat you. Be thankful that at some point your quarterback was making some Heisman list, even though he's not good at all. So I think that, they should be good, happy with what they have and, hope to maybe fire him in a year where there's not a coaching carousel. But outside of that, you're a gamecock.
Hold that thought right there, because let me get this right here. Okay. Let me ask Ian what he really thinks about South Carolina. Damn, boy, you didn't hold back. That's what I'm talking about, baby. We don't hold back on this program right here. So if you're a South Carolina fan and you watch this, sorry. That's just how we roll, baby. That's just how we roll.
It is what it is. I never apologize for the truth. Never.
Well, with that being, we'll go ahead on that, and I kind of feel and I take that back. Let me see, so my next guy, it's kind of, so the next team I got and the next coach I got, man, it's hard to describe with this guy because he was a former player, former Heisman Trophy winner, does this, but Heupel at Tennessee. They went 8-5, 4-4. Now, Tennessee fans Jesus have mercy. They do. They think their football team is a national contender every year, and they ain't been since Peyton Manning left. Well, since T. Martin left, actually. Let me rephrase it. T. I'm sorry about that, my guy. My bad, brother. But he is. He's an offensive innovator. Where he went. He inherited a boy. You can't believe that used to be a quarterback in the.
He won the Heisman, didn't he?
Yeah, he won the Heisman, man. Oh. Yeah.
I think that's the issue right there, son. And I know you got to quote out all these stats, but you not coming in my living room. You look like you're melting. He looks like a melting ice cream cone. You're not coming in my living room. And
he did look like he hit the buffet a couple of times before he came.
And so, nah, man, I think he falls victim to his appearance. Like, we're walking resumes, man, and certain times, like when you're in a position such as a head coach, and then I'm sure that he's in there talking about, I won the Heisman Trophy in 1999, and you don't even see the same person.
Right.
I'll have to take a blood sample from him to prove that he's that guy, that quarterback, Oklahoma. So go ahead with the stats, man. But he a victim to his own body.
Well, and he's a victim too of this whole era with with NIL with all the thing going on. Because let's be real, he was banking on Joey Aguilar being there this year. And the court said not no, but hell no. And so now he's got a three-way quarterback battle between George McIntyre, Fajon Brandon, and a transfer Ryan Staub. So they got to figure out who their quarterback's going to be. And so, but here's my thing. You and I know kind of what to expect. At least I feel like we do. But are Tennessee fans really realistic? Like, I guarantee you, Tennessee fans think that Tennessee is going to compete for the national championship. Am I wrong?
Have they ever been?
I know, exactly.
You made a great point, man. You made a great point. Tennessee swears by that Peyton Manning. He didn't even win the championship.
Exactly.
T. Martin comes in there, and so, that's how they've always been. Now I'm not a hater, even though I'm realistic, and Tennessee has, given Bama, a lot of hard games, but we've beaten them a lot of times. Like, Tennessee, man, like you literally got kids that are in their 30s and probably have never witnessed, a back-to-back championship against Bama, and so it just is what it is, man. They, most people do not realize how much older Bama fans hate Tennessee, man. Yes. Like they're like Philip Fulmer.
Preach on it, brother. Preach on it. I know man, like, John Chavis. There are people. Coach Chavis. I coached under John Chavis. I was very fortunate to be under him. And John Chavis told me that more people from Alabama, and he was also the Birmingham Stallions, their USFL. He was their defensive coordinator. Right. We talked during that time, and he was recent. He's like, man, they hate me. Like, they absolutely hate me.
Right. Fulmer went out his way to take Bama down, and he almost did, man.
Right.
And so, they'll never forgive him for that. And,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, even the guy that Jeremy Pruitt, great defensive mind, also loyal to Bama. He would have been at Bama right now if it wasn't for Tennessee finding a way to hit him with some of the most ridiculous, charges that even in this day and age where it's the wild, wild west and these kids are running around doing whatever they want to, and this guy still can't coach, man.
Right.
Still can't coach, so it's crazy. So yeah, man, I'm sort of in the middle. I'm in that Auburn hate situation. Right. But I definitely, have zero respect for Tennessee, and they haven't won nothing in order to be as arrogant as they are.
And let's see their schedule, because I know Chris has got that ready to pull up. Look at this. They start at Georgia Tech. I'm gonna tell you right now, Georgia Tech is not going to be. That's going to be a test. That's going to be a test right there. They got Texas coming to them. They got Auburn coming to them. at Arkansas. You know what? I don't know why, but Arkansas always plays them tough. Always do. We win when we shouldn't win against them. And then they got Alabama at home. They got South Carolina at South Carolina. Their only real hard is at Texas A&M. Most of their games are at home. So if you go forward, if you go forward that schedule, you might be losing some fan base right there. You could lose a few things right there, Coach. I'm just saying, watch how this season plays out, because you could literally, there was no momentum from this last year. And so, this could, you do the same thing you did last year. What I think I had them at 8-5 and 4-4 in the SEC. Yeah, Tennessee, their arrogance is not going to accept that. I can just tell you that right now. You know that, and I know that.
Right,
so that's where I think that's headed on that. So
yeah, agree with you.
So with that being said, let's see. Make sure I haven't missed anybody. Oh no, I haven't. One, and this is the guy, man. I feel like I don't want this guy to lose anything. I want this to be the feel-good story of the year, man. And I'm not even talking about my team, Arkansas. I'm really not. Jeff Libby, man. Yeah. Mississippi State. 5-8. They were 1-7 in the SEC. Libby is one hell of a look. When I was at Arkansas, I heard people talk about this guy and his offensive mind. Like, dude, I mean, with mad respect. You hear me, Ian? I'm talking mad respect. And and he's had productive offenses at UCF, Ole Miss, and I think Oklahoma. He was there. He developed Mackenzie Milton and Dylan Gabriel, and we know what they went and did. We know what Gabriel did. Where he finished up. But God, it's such a hard job. Anyway, just when you say Mississippi State, as a coach, you're going, damn. You just are going, damn. I got a coach there. But it's a different kind of pressure, and look, if Mississippi State and Arkansas were, Mississippi State would be good with a bowl. If he goes to a bowl game, he's right. And the man is a good enough coach, and he should be able to do that. But there's been some good coaches, man, that's been there. Right. Sylvester Croom. The only one was Dan Mullen. He sustained success there during his tenure there, and it jumped that off, went to Florida. So it can be done. It can be done. I just don't know about the facilities. I don't know about the NIL money, because let's be real.
Yeah, it's not, man. It's not. And, like I said, I sort of feel the same way about Mississippi State that I feel about South Carolina. But I think Mississippi State do realize who they are. And they still have a lot of pride, man. I'll never forget my first time going into Starkville. And if I remember correctly, man, that's a dead town, man. You have like college football type towns, like, for example, Tuscaloosa, but it feels alive, man. You have that. It's on the water. There's a lot of, bars, and then you can zip right on down the interstate and go to Birmingham if you want to. It didn't feel that way in Starkville, man. But I remember 1992, this was the team that Gene Stallings was coaching that, went on to beat Gino Torretta in Miami in that Sugar Bowl. But anyway, had a couple of close games that year, and one of them was against Mississippi State, man. And I remember going up in that stadium and hearing those cowbells, and I'm like, what? And they get fined like every game, man. That's not against. They're not within SEC rules, and they just get fined and they just pay their fines every time. But it's very loud in there. And but at the end of the day, they are who they are. And I think they realize it. Every now and then they'll get a Dan Mullen that comes in there, and we all know that Dan Mullen was just searching around, trying to improve his resume, show that, hey, I just was not an offensive coordinator, up under Urban Meyer. And, that was not the final destination for him. Yeah, you had Sly Croom there. You had a lot of people that exemplified Mississippi football, man. Tough, lunch pail, blue collar, grab it, lace them up. But, I don't think anybody ever goes into their seasons there, with realistic aspirations of winning the national championship. Right. And so, It is what it is. So I think you touch on something briefly. Just show that you're headed somewhere.
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
he has a.
Well, and you're right, because look, people forget. If I'm not mistaken, they knocked off Arizona State last year, early in the season, and then they gave then number 15 Tennessee and number 22 Texas. They gave them a run for their money. They gave them they were very competitive. Should have won. They were there all the way up to the end. So you're right. They are they are there, and and I feel like they were playing catch up when Mike Leach passed. That they were it threw everything in a tailspin a little bit, and they're playing catch up. So but yes. Yeah, so I hope everything goes where they win a few more games, and this is like that feel good story of the SEC.
Right.
That's where I hope it goes. And with that being said, we're going to take off. And what their schedule? Let me tell you, their schedule is they have an interesting schedule. They're at Minnesota, at South Carolina. They have Missouri and Alabama at home, at LSU, at Texas, at Ole Miss. So their schedule is that at Minnesota game. You've got a interesting matchup there with the second-year quarterback from Minnesota. I'm trying to think of the kid's name. Oh my gosh, Lord have mercy! I can see him right now. Coached him at Fayetteville. It'll come to me later. But anyway,
what's the weather like there in September?
Yeah, it's going to be hot for sure.
Oh, going to be hot. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it should be. Yeah. Global warming. Let's hope it's hot. We'll see. It should work out. But with that being said, let's go to Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. This man can lose some things, but it's because of different kind of pressure, in my opinion. He is following the GOAT, man. You're following the GOAT. And I don't give a damn. That's hard to do anywhere you're at, And, people have questioned whether he belongs in the SEC. Is he the right coach? He's more finesse oriented. He needs to be more physical. But now people question his recruiting, and he's got a top 5 national recruiting class for 25 and 26. That's according to the Bammer Hammer articles that I read here. So you know what? You're the one tied in to Alabama. You've heard some things. Right. I want to let you spill your guts, my man, and talk us through it.
Yeah, he's definitely on the hot seat, man. But once again, this is a situation I think, and I've been generally negative about a lot of programs. For some reason, I'm not about Alabama because I think that he still can win, but you just have to be realistic, man. I mean, and really just look at LSU. Okay, look at the foundation that Saban laid that allowed a few more runs to win national championships there. They were moronic, but at the same time, they were smart enough to not mess up what was there. I think DeBoer, I'm not going to say he's messing up what was there, but his style is so polar opposite of Nick Saban, And so at the end of the day, I think he has his quarterback. I think we just saw that in the spring game. But it's outside of that, it's some unknowns, man. And sometimes we fall victim every year. Every year, in the off season, we're hearing, oh man, all the issues are fixed and this and that. And, Alabama has a couple of running backs and, man, they were killing it in practice and they had videos of them squatting 2,000 pounds, and then they go out there and, get 17 yards or 9 carries. And so there's still a lot of holes. Running game does not look to be improved. A lot of the offensive line totally overhauled, man. They got a lot of players out, got a lot of players in there, and we didn't see any improvement when it comes to that. Will there be a quarterback improvement? Yes. Although Todd Simpson that went out there and obviously throwing himself into potentially the first round of the draft. But I do think that Keelan Russell is more talented than just about anybody going back to Tua. I'm still a Tua fan, and I love those Mac Jones teams, man. But that was scheme, But when it comes to actual talent, arm talent, I have to go back to Tua. And I think Keelan Russell's there. Outside of that, I do think that where DeBoer is going to make his money is, buzzing somebody in the gate to bring me some groceries. But where DeBoer has to make his money, he has to run the ball, to some degree. And I'm not seeing that at all, man. And that's the difference, in the SEC. You got to give them something to think about, and if you don't, you will never, go back there. Even, the most fun and gun Steve Spurrier teams, still had I'm trying to think of their running backs. I think Eric Rhett, was back there, or they had some very capable home run hitting running backs, and you just have not seen that at Bama. And so I think ultimately that will be his undoing. I do think that he's closer than people think, even with the defense. He has his guy, this is only year 2. He didn't come there with DeBoer. He came there. No, he was there from the start. I think the offensive coordinator came in a year later. But regardless, man, that's a lot to replace. I see some positives, but if he does not run that ball in the SEC, this is the only place that we have an advantage, man. Skill is skill. You'll have skilled players at Alabama, you have skilled players at Georgia, you have skilled players at Ohio State, you have skilled players everywhere. But in them trenches, man, them boys want to be warm. They don't want to be near the Great Lakes, run around campus with their textbooks. They want to be warm and they want to come down south. And usually that's where the difference is, in those trenches, defensive line, offensive line. And DeBoer is not exploiting that to any degree. And you will never be successful in any of these southern states unless you show that you can dominate a team in the trenches. And jury's still out on that. But outside of that, I'm not as worried about, the rest of it as everybody else.
Well, you proved a point, and you brought up Eric Rhett from Florida, right, running back. But then people were like, oh, Steve Spurrier didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but Emmitt Smith was Florida.
I don't think he was Spurrier, and he was Florida.
Okay, I thought he was during Spurrier's year.
It was very close, very close.
Okay, yeah. All right, but yeah, some of the best running backs, and there's no excuse. I mean, dude, there's enough running backs in Florida to go around. Hell, there's enough running backs in Alabama to go around. You ought to be able to get a running back, but that's one of the things in the SEC. And if DeBoer hadn't figured it out, you've got to have a run game. They have to fear the run. They have to fear the pass on that. So So with that being said, that's the one. And and me and Chris, the guy that's producing backstage here, we got like 7 more minutes or whatever. I even brought up, this is how crazy the SEC is, and he told me something. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And you probably understand this because you've been an Alabama fan. But I think he told me something crazy for like the last 10 years since COVID and before COVID, because they only played 8 games. Kirby Smart has had a 10-win season every year. Had a 10-win season. And people in Georgia are mad because they're expecting 4 and 5. And Chris even said the worst thing ever happened was Nick Saban. And he called him the greatest coach probably of all time because they expected that to happen. And he said, if you jump on the message boards over here, people are already like, you're grumbling. I'm like, because he don't demand. You're elite.
It's the same thing we were talking about Sark, man. He just looks like a little bitty kid. Like, they should be very loyal to him. Okay, so not only that, if I remember correctly, he was a great player for them, and then he comes back home and he leaves the GOAT, man. He would have been crown royalty at Alabama, but he's so good at what he does that he makes people doubt that Saban is really who he is. Because he really, but at the end of the day, who do you see Kirby telling the seat sit down?
right.
Who do you see, man? And so it's pathetic. Saban, he made you feel guilty talking about him on a podcast, man. Like I've had a couple of times where I was, a little down about him on here, and I was scared to go lay on my bed.
Well, you look, Chris pulled this up right here. In 2016, I guess that would have been his first year. He went 8-5, 4-4. And then in 2020, he went 8-2. But from there, it was 13-2, 11-3, 12-2, 14-1, 15-0, 13-1, 11. I mean, dude, Georgia fans, shut up. Go home. Like you got nothing to complain about. Like,
but that's the time that we're in, man. I was having a conversation with a guy on my staff in the office, and it's like people will be so mad at you for saying LeBron's not number one. If he's in your top 5, your top 50, isn't that phenomenal? You know, compare that to all the players that ever played, but people will want to fight you because you don't put him in number one. And that's what it is, man. It's really not reality. You know, so many people are projecting and they feel like the standing of their team is the standing of their life.
But, you know, I give you a perfect example, Ian. Arkansas. They absolute hated John Calipari.
Right.
Until that fool took the job in Arkansas. They love that man. They love him.
Right.
Like, John Calipari was my dog from the beginning. I'm like, bro, I sit over here.
He's so cool, man. He's so cool. We watched games that me and my wife, we were in there watching games that you know, he's playing against these teams and the coach has a polo and all the teams have a matching polo. Calipari and all his assistants just whatever the hell is in their closet, man, and they come out there looking like the 5 heartbeats. It's so funny, bro.
Dude, but then sometimes Calipari dress up and he's like, man, that dude, he got an Italian last name. He might be a made man too.
Right.
So you don't know, bro. You don't
probably
know.
is. He probably is. Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, but even you know, going back to Kirby, Coach Smart, I was just like, damn. Like if he just has if he goes 9-4. People in Georgia are gonna be pissed, you know. And I'm like, people in Arkansas build a statue of Silverfield, and you know what? And I got to give some props out to my coach Silverfield. Finally, someone is holding players accountable at the University of Arkansas. We had a kid, a misdemeanor, but impeded an investigation and lied to the police. He lasted about 8 minutes after he got to coach's desk, finding a new home. And he wasn't playing with. And this kid was a 4-star athlete, but he'd been in trouble at Florida State. He'd been at LSU. And you know what? That's what it takes. I appreciate that, coach, out there. And you know that's where it starts right there. And so
that'll bring a lot more players with parents like me. Man, that means a lot, man. I mean, in this day and age, I don't feel safe. Like, you know, I'm gonna tell you, man, you know, here in Atlanta, you know, I work in a federal building and they're scaring us to death about the World Cup. You know, it's like this is supposed to be one of the most beautiful you know, world uniting events, and all they're telling us is going to be 500,000 people down here, and it's going to be a lot of robberies, and you know, and we're like, wow, you know, I'm trying to negotiate with my agency, like, do I close my office and we just all work remote? So you know, it's scary out here, man, and you want to know that you're sending your most prized possession. Like, imagine what it takes to get your child to the level that they are. That's not osmosis, man. That's a lot of, you know, mallets driving. That's a lot of sleepless nights. That's a lot of mama at practice, you know, while daddy working overtime to afford a camp. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of that. These kids are not there by accident. And so, you know, you want to come in my house and have my kid go to your unstable program where you might not be there next year? No. You know, that's not how it goes. And so, you know, I'm glad that Arkansas has, and that means a lot. And hopefully everything works the way that it's supposed to work.
Absolutely.
And he gets some traffic because of that, man, because I think that's commendable.
And, you know, as former veterans, both of us, we were used to accountability, because if we did something, we were held accountable. It usually meant UCMJ, which in the Army is Article 15, or Captain's Mass in the Navy. So accountability is big in our world. And like you said, I appreciate that. And, man, with that being said, Ian, you got anything else you want to finish up? If not, I'll kick us off here and we'll go on about.
No, man, I enjoyed it. We'll get to it next year. You know, Alabama had their A-Day. You know, Keelan Russell really made a lot of, you know, people really realize that battle's his. I think the quarterback, Mac, was a little dinged up, but, you know, Russell really looked that much better than him. Just something to consider, man. You know, A-Day isn't what it is. It used to be. I was at that first year when Saban was hired, and it was like, you know, 96,000 people at that A-Day. I remember I had a baby in my arm and people were rushing in, kind of pinning us against the wall. You know, they said this last A-Day was the lowest attended in Alabama in decades. And, it's easy to say, well, they lost interest in DeBoer, but really, you look across the country, they're canceling, because they're scared. A-Day highlights your backups. And so you put your backups out there just for Ole Miss to come and take them,
Right.
So, because of that, A-Day was getting very generic and they weren't. So it's just interesting to see who's really using that as a tool now. Or is it a dog and pony show? Man, they're not even televising them anymore.
Right.
So, it's just something to keep in mind. But
yeah, and you brought that up, and I thought about that, and I went back and looked. Arkansas did not have spring games 2 years in a row, and
wow.
I thought, well, but it was because Pittman didn't want to lose his player because Ole Miss was getting our very best players for the last 3 years and getting backups that were key cogs in the wheel. And so, when you brought that up, it makes sense. And you know what? We need to do a show on that and come up with that. That's a deal on that. Yep. So maybe we can do that next week. We'll come up with something and do that. But hey, we've been here. We've been on an hour now. And guys, we appreciate y'all. We got a few viewers out there and appreciate every one of y'all. This is the College Sports Crew, and you're watching us on YouTube at College Sports Crew. And you can check us out on X at College Crew. Hit us up, hit that like button. That's what gets our message out there, gets our product out there, and we would appreciate it. And dude, this thing's growing. We got Chris, we got Austin, we got Jamal, and I know I'm missing out on some people here. Adam, we got all these guys, man. We got Chasing Omaha. It's going to be on tomorrow. Myself, Kyle Sutherland. We are going to break down the Arkansas Georgia game. And go ahead, Ian. Yes, sir.
Just real quick, you named a lot of fabulous people, but who won the NCAA tournament bracket challenge?
It's funny. We couldn't find the records for that right there. It was so funny. We just couldn't find the records on that. And with that being said, the bracket challenge came out. Our guy Ian, literally, he picked the teams with the best colored jerseys. That's what he did, and he won the damn thing. So, yeah.
Hey, let me tell y'all, man, I am a professional at prompts in Gemini, and that's all I do here, man. I don't think I watched a game all year, but I won that, and I also won fantasy league. I hadn't watched one NFL game this year, but I just knew the prompts to put in. So tap in with your boy. You want some picks? I got y'all.
We're gonna have to go there. We're gonna have to go there for sure. But hey, with that being said, I am doing tomorrow. Y'all, we got a few viewers on here. Chasing Omaha. It is the original Chasing Omaha.
The original.
It seems like it's being often imitated, but it can't be duplicated. You can't duplicate it.
Quick story. So one night I'm up. So me and Sean haven't done a show in weeks, right? Because he's moving. And I see a Chasing Omaha pop up. I was like, I know this guy did not do a show. And he let me know he was filming. So I go in and it's a whole nother Chasing Omaha. So let's be clear. Trademark, we'll throw that all out there. You don't know who's on these shows. You know what I'm saying? So now give the name up, brother. You're not original.
That's right. So we're gonna have my guy from Hog Beach, Kyle Sutherland. We're gonna break down that Arkansas Georgia matchup this weekend, which is scary as an Arkansas fan, because I'm telling you right now, Georgia is a legitimate national title contender in my eyes. And they matched Florida this last weekend, pitch for pitch. So we're gonna see what happened. They took that series, but I mean their pitching was something to be impressed with. So we're gonna break that down tomorrow. I hope to see you guys there. And hey, this is a Veteran Sports Voice podcast, spoken by those who served. And again, we got people in real world situations out across that nation right now that are serving in real world theaters and facing the reality of what can happen. Keep them in your thoughts, prayers, and check on your veterans. Everybody knows one, especially the ones that says they're okay. And those Gold Star members out there, they've got a sacrifice that we can't even imagine. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers and reach out to them. And with that being said, guys, we salute you and we hope to see you next week.
Absolutely.